Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of Norfolk Community Forum. My name is Kevin Calcutt. I am the chair of the Norfolk Select Board, and I'm joined today by our town administrator, Blythe Robinson. Hi, Blythe, how are you?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So this is a busy season for us. We're gearing up for a town meeting coming up very soon. We just finished up our last select board meeting ahead of town meeting last night. So we'll be using this forum to go over any of the high points, the exciting items that are out there. We have a fantastic guest who's going to be talking about something coming up at town meeting, and we'll call out the items of note for the future. So starting off with the important things that are in front of us right now, Blythe, we have some COVID updates, right?
We do. I'm glad to report that this past week, we learned that Norfolk's overall numbers have dropped a little bit. Our positivity rate went down by about 6 percentage points. We're still in the yellow zone, which is considered moderate risk, but hopefully we've taken a turn and our numbers will continue to drop a little further back into the green zone. But overall, our residents are doing well in terms of getting vaccinated. Almost half of our residents have received their first shot, which is great news. We're very pleased about that. But we would also continue to remind people that we know it's getting a little old and tired, but please keep following the protocols of wearing your mask, social distancing, being careful. As more people get vaccinated, hopefully those things will be less necessary in the future. But we really appreciate everything that everyone's done so far and ask them to just keep it up a little longer. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm sure everybody's aware at this point, but Massachusetts did move into phase 3 of the vaccination schedule, which means that anybody over the age of 16 is eligible to make an appointment and get a vaccine. So for those who weren't signed up for the registration or the pre-registration, now is the time to go and start looking for your appointment and getting in. So we really encourage everybody to do that as quickly as possible as well.
Yes.
Our next update is related to Southwood Hospital. I know that there's been a lot of interest here in town about the new ownership making the purchase from the Archdiocese. GFI has completed that purchase back in January, and they are currently undergoing their environmental evaluation of the site. Obviously, we've all been aware that there is going to be some level of cleanup or contamination mitigation associated to the site. But what they're doing right now is going through a little bit more of a deeper dive into what exactly that looks like in terms of what's going to be required. We don't expect that there's going to be too much back and forth during this period. This is going to be a period where they're really focused on just getting that assessment done and using that to build out what would potentially be a development proposal to work with the town and the neighbors on to ensure that the property comes out to everybody's expectations. So we eagerly look forward. We're doing check-ins once a week. We're pinging them to see if they have anything new for us. But like we said, we weren't expecting that there'd be too much dialogue going back and forth while they go through this important period. What we have done in the interim is we've added 2 standing agenda items to the boards that would be most involved in any of the redevelopment discussions. The planning board has added an agenda item that will be standing on their agendas for their future meetings related to Southwood and the interactions with GFI, as well as the select board has added a liaison report agenda item in which the liaison to the public involvement plan with DEP will be able to provide any updates or field any questions from residents in that forum. So we will be keeping everybody up to date as to what's going on as we learn new information. But I think right now, everybody's just really looking forward to what could potentially happen with that site.
Yes, you're correct about that.
So moving into our budget update, after a long budget season with a lot of questions that needed to be answered, last night the select board unanimously approved the budget. Blythe, do you want to go through a high-level overview?
Yes, thank you. So yes, they did. And tonight, advisory committee meets, and it's their job to make a determination whether they want to recommend support and approval of the budget or not for town meeting. So I urge people to tune into that if they have time. But overall, this year in Norfolk is much better financially than the year that we're just coming through. There was so much uncertainty with COVID a year ago that led us to really reduce the budget significantly and cut back in all departments. This year, things are in a better place. Some of the difficulties that thought we would see happen didn't really come to fruition, but that didn't mean that this year was a budget that we just went back to business as usual. We know that this pandemic has not hit everybody equally, and so we try to be very thoughtful in this year's budget process about what we restored and how we moved forward. So the budget's balanced with an overall 3.53% increase. That is actually below the town's average over the past 20 years, which is more along the lines of 4.5%. The budget fully funds both the requests of both school districts, which I know is important to a lot of residents, and helps restore some of the things that they'll need to have in place when now school is fully operational at the K through 6 level. We expect that school will be more normal in the fall. We're prepared for that, and we've made some targeted increases and restorations on the town side of the budget. But overall, we were very careful this year to, as I say, be thoughtful about how much we spend. And I think everyone is pleased to see that for the first time in many years, we're not using any free cash to balance the budget, as well as not depending on the full amount of prison mitigation funds that the town has received in prior years. So I think we're continuing to improve the town's financial situation, but also delivering a budget that will provide residents the services at the level they're expecting. So looking forward to town meeting and debating that.
Absolutely. And, I think that it goes without saying that we really do appreciate the efforts of you and Todd Lindmark, our finance director, to weigh the expectations of a diverse board of 3 to come to a final product that you put before us that I think everybody could get on board with. That was a great balance of ensuring that we got back to a place where everybody was operating at a capacity that was workable and within the expectations of the community, while also keeping in mind that we want to try to stay away from using funding sources such as free cash or variable sources such as prison mitigation to fund our operating budget. So thank you very much, and we really do appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Going further into town meeting, we do have a fairly large warrant ahead of us for our spring town meeting coming up on May 8th. Do you want to give us a high-level overview of what we're going to be expecting for a town meeting?
Sure. We have 29 articles, and we'll be taking those up, at town meeting on Saturday, May 8th, a couple days earlier than usual, so we can have it outdoors at King Philip High School again this spring. The articles run the gamut from the typical articles for budget and approval of revolving funds and various community preservation projects that are proposed this year, approval of state Chapter 90 road monies. We have one general bylaw article to update our animal regulations, which we've been working on for the last number of months. And we have 2 citizen petitions that are coming forward, and then a few zoning articles, which I realize we're going to talk a little bit more about in the next few minutes.
So one of the things that we've been working on here in town over the course of the last more than 2 years has been a redeveloped strategy or a reassessment of our strategy for how we handle zoning in town center. We have a master plan that outlines what the vision may be, what we want to achieve, and then we have zoning in place, which we need to assess if that's going to get us to that vision or not. And with the recent development in the areas, on the outsides of the B1 district or just getting into it recently, it was a great time to reassess what that strategy looked like to ensure it was in line with the expectations of the community. So today we've invited Josh Fiala, who is a principal planner from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. He's been working with us since February of 2019. When we started this assessment process with the B1 Working Zoning Committee. He's been joining us through a grant program with Mass Housing, and he's been working with communities on similar mixed-use zoning strategy developments a number of times in his career. So Josh, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome.
Hello, Kevin and Blythe. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Josh.
So Josh, you've been with us since the start of this thing. We've been talking about different steps that we could take to help encourage the kind of growth that was within the expectations of the community. In the master plan, we've talked about how we're able to bridge the gap between financial feasibility for developers and landowners and how we could achieve that goal. Would you mind just kind of taking us through high level about how we got from where we were in February of 2019 to where we are today?
Sure. Yeah, as is needed with zoning recommendations and changes, the town has gone through an extensive and comprehensive process to determine the scope of the changes and to really feel confident in the potential outcomes. The planning board established the B1 committee to review the existing bylaws and recommend changes. The B1 committee has met regularly since the beginning of 2019. They met as a committee for at least 15 public meetings. They hosted 2 community meetings in 2019 to gather insights and feedback from residents, met with and interviewed property owners, and prepared a community survey that reached 540 residents and gathered their responses. We've worked closely with the planning board in ultimately bringing these recommendations forward. The committee has included representatives of the select board, the planning board, the Board of Health, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and Advisory Committee. All of this process has resulted in the recommendations that are now in the town meeting warrant article that has been sponsored and supported by the planning board and supported by the advisory committee. This process has kept the town's interest as the center point of the discussion, and recommendations have tried to find a balance point between the perspectives that must be taken into consideration. First, the town must support and be comfortable with the zoning for town center. The residents and stakeholders want a successful and vibrant center, and so we've tried to be very responsive to everything we've heard. Second, we're trying to balance what we've heard from property owners and developers about what is needed for successful development. It doesn't matter if the zoning is just as the town wants it, if it doesn't actually result in changes on the ground in terms of new development and small businesses in the town center. This balance is difficult because we're trying to approximate the many viewpoints of multiple sides in this hypothetical negotiation. But we shouldn't forget that through zoning, we're setting the conditions for a successful project to come forward. Then the hypothetical negotiation can become more tangible, and the town can work with a proposed development to shape it to the needs of the property and the community.
Thank you, Josh. Help us understand the balance that I think is important with these types of projects. The balance between feedback from the community that we've heard and the needs, wants, interests of landowners and developers.
Sure, thanks, Blythe. In general terms, through the process, we identified zoning characteristics that could be modified that would increase the financial feasibility of a development in town center. And these characteristics included building height, for example. We heard from property owners and developers that 4 stories were preferred as a height for a viable development project. We discussed it at length through those meetings I just outlined and heard a lot from the community, and in the end decided to keep the height at its current 3-story maximum based upon that community feedback. Other items, such as decreasing the amount of parking required, would also potentially help create a more viable development project. But we also heard strong concerns about that reduction and kept the minimum parking requirements the same as they are today. Where we have added to the viability of the development is through an increase in maximum residential density and more flexibility in parking through the shared parking reduction. So it really is about balancing the differing points of view and putting together a set of characteristics that will improve the likelihood that a successful mixed-use development can occur, and that the community will not see development with characteristics that were seen as objectionable through this process. From my perspective, no point of view has gotten everything they wanted or asked for, and it has been a balanced approach to zoning changes that make them better than what you have today, both for the residents and their vision of town center and for property owners and developers.
Thank you, Josh. That's really helpful.
Yeah, Josh, and to your point, I mean, feedback is what drove most of the initiatives that we outlined in this proposal for town meeting from the B1 committee's perspective. The feedback from the community, the feedback from professionals in the planning industry, and the feedback from landowners and developers. And we weighed that to be able to come up with what you're going to see before you at town meeting. That being said, we also had to compare that against actual data from comparable communities and such to be able to understand what was actually feasible from a financial perspective and what kind of impact other communities who have done something similar have seen in their respective situations. So to that point, could you talk about where we pulled some of that guidance data in terms of feasibility impact, and specifically talk about some of the comparable communities and the impact of the recommendations on the school-age children population?
Sure. So we've at MAPC and myself have supported the conversations of the town with a few analyses that I'll just highlight. One was a parcel analysis where we identified the parcels in the district most likely to change. This resulted in recommendations to change the sub-district boundaries to target these properties. We also performed a build-out analysis that examined the potential build-out under the different zoning characteristics that we considered through the process. And finally, we also created a general financial pro forma that helped us to model the impact of the zoning characteristics on financial feasibility, that critical question that we're trying to answer. The modeling was based on recent comparable projects and the market context of Norfolk. This model showed that each of the primary characteristics considered, increasing the height, increasing density, decreasing parking, all positively impacted the positive financial feasibility of development in town center. This modeling also showed that development in town center is not going to be a runaway success. These are projects which are just at the margins of being financially viable. So adjusting these zoning characteristics are critical. Making the development work is difficult. Increasing the density and other zoning recommendations will help, but they are not everything that could be done to help, and are certainly not sort of giving away development in the town center, so to speak. Specifically to some of the impacts that you mentioned, Kevin, and schools and others. So mixed use development is a common approach to development and investment in our region's town centers. Nearby towns like Millis have passed mixed use zoning years ago and seen development occur. One example is 969 Main Street in Millis. Rentham has passed mixed use zoning for their town center and continues to discuss the future of a major previous factory site behind South Street. Or Islington Center and Westwood are all examples of nearby communities looking at mixed use zoning as a solution to vibrant centers. All around the region where commercial ground floor uses are desired, allowing residential uses above has been effective to increase the financial viability and success of the project and helps to strengthen the district overall. Norfolk is not behind the curve on this. The town has had mixed use zoning for some time, but the development that has been able to occur under the current characteristics has been completed. The model of 18 Union Street is a great success. However, the recommended changes are necessary to improve the chances for success on the remaining vacant parcels in town center.
So Josh, assuming these pass on May 8th, help us understand how long it takes, if there's a timeline that the community could expect to see changes in our town center.
Zoning is a little difficult because it regulates what is possible, but it does not ensure that certain outcomes will occur. It's an important distinction. So zoning does not ensure that certain outcomes will occur. We are setting up the opportunity and the parameters for a successful outcome. But the intended result, mixed-use development, is entirely dependent on private actions and investments that will take place, in this case, on private properties. These results are subject to broader market conditions, and as we all know, those market conditions are currently difficult to predict. Sometimes a development is ready to go and will take place immediately after zoning is approved. From what we've heard from property owners, it doesn't appear that any property has a project lined up quite in that manner in Norfolk Town Center. Some communities have gotten the zoning they want approved and then waited years for tangible results of the project to take place. This is more likely to be the case here. And still other communities have made zoning changes, such as the ones contemplated here, to realize that the requirements that they've put together were not enough to push a project to financial viability, and have then had to potentially revisit zoning again to open the door just a little bit further. Unfortunately, with the number of variables involved, it is difficult to say with certainty, if you make these zoning changes, you will see this result in a specific time frame. But what we're hoping is that we've made the conditions more positive overall.
Thank you. And I also would, I think, point out that when a proposal comes forward, it's going to go before the appropriate boards, planning board, and residents who are interested in following those and having some input into the final approvals will have that opportunity as well.
That's right.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
And Kevin, do you want me to circle back a little bit about the some of the impacts?
Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, so even though mixed use development includes other uses besides residential, oftentimes what we hear about in terms of concerns from communities are related to the residential uses. So one of the most widespread worries about impacts that show up frequently in all of our communities in the region are both school enrollment and traffic impacts. In regard to school enrollment, our agency, MAPC, produced an analysis titled "The Waning Influence of Housing Production on Public School Enrollment." In that study, MAPC examined housing, permit, and enrollment trends across 234 public school districts over a 6-year period from 2010 to 2016. The findings show that the conventional wisdom that links housing production with inevitable enrollment growth does not hold true. In cities and towns with the most rapid housing production, enrollment barely budged. And most districts with the largest student increases saw very little housing unit change. The conclusion is that the rate of housing unit growth is not a useful predictor of overall enrollment change, nor is rapid housing development a precondition to sudden enrollment increases. It appears that broad demographic trends, parental preferences, and housing availability play a much larger role in driving enrollment growth and decline. In addition, large mixed-use developments in other towns have completed what is called a fiscal impact analysis. It is an analysis which compares the amount of revenue brought into a town to the increment of public expenditures for a specific project, including things like public safety, town services, and the schools. Typically, these types of analyses show that mixed-use development is a net positive for municipalities and result in more tax revenue generated than service needs. In terms of traffic, as you all know, Norfolk Town Center has the benefit of a commuter rail stop at its center. And yes, this means some of the future residents of Town Center will use the train and can walk to some destinations in the center. It may mean that households could have one less vehicle, or at least use vehicles less than their more suburban located counterparts. But I think the really important part of having a commuter rail stop is that your primary intersections and traffic flow in Norfolk Town Center have been designed and optimized for the dramatic pulse of peak traffic that occurs when regular commuters arrive and depart from the train by car. This has resulted in the intersections at Main Street and Rockwood Road, Liberty Lane and Union Street to be designed as roundabouts. Compared to traffic signals and all-way stop control intersections, roundabouts provide improved safety, higher capacity for peak periods, and less delay in off-peak times. You already have roadway and intersection systems in Town Center, which are suited to accommodate additional traffic.
Thank you, Josh. You know, a lot of the feedback that we heard up to this point really touches on those three main things that you noted, right? The impact of traffic, the impact of schools, and the impact of infrastructure, and how actually feasible all this is. And I think, you know, after 2.5 years of review, dialogue, debate, analysis, and a final proposal, I think that we've addressed a lot of those concerns, and am hopeful that the community will identify that effort and come to town meeting ready to vote based on the vision. You know, I think that one of the things that we've maintained this entire time is I don't think anybody's going to try to convince anyone of one perspective or another, but we do want to make sure everybody has all the facts to be able to make their own decision and come to their own conclusion. So we really look forward to bringing this forward to the community, hearing the questions, hearing the debate, and getting some guidance on how we move forward. So once again, Josh, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we really appreciate all the work that you've put in with us over the last 2.5 years. You answered a lot of emails, a lot of last minute Zoom calls, and I'm sure that you're as eager as we are to see this come to a head at a town meeting.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Blythe. It's been a pleasure working with you all.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, Blythe. So we have a couple of things we want to call out for the community that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. The first one that we want to touch on is our annual town election. That is going to be on Tuesday, May 4th. Voting will, as always, be held at Freeman Kennedy at 70 Boardman Street from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. For those who are looking to get in-person early voting done, that will start this Saturday, April 24th at 9 a.m. and go to 2 p.m. That will be at the ground floor, the town clerk's office, and we ask that you please enter through that front door at the front of Town Hall if you'd like to do that. Additional dates for early person in voting are Monday, April 26th from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., Tuesday, April 27th from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Wednesday, April 28th from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Thursday, April 29th from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. So please, I know that this is a relatively mild election, for lack of a better term, due to the uncontested nature of some of the races that are on there, but it is important that we still get out there, we get our votes cast, and the community gets involved.
Yes, it's true. We also have town meeting coming up just a few days later on Saturday, May 8th. I just would remind people that that's a departure from our usual second Tuesday of May. It got moved back to King Philip High School in Rentham, and it's going to start at 10 a.m. that day. It's out on the football field, asking everyone to pray for good weather for us so that we can do it that day, because if it does rain, we will move it to the following Saturday, May 15th. And the setup for anyone who came last year, I think it went really, really well. We had everybody spaced out on the football field, good 6 feet apart. The audio system was excellent. And this year, the moderator will expect everyone to wear masks until they're seated. Once they're seated, they'll be able to take them off. But people can look forward to the warrant being posted on our website likely tomorrow. And then we'll get the whole document off to the printer. We're hoping that it will hit people's mailboxes the Saturday before town meeting. We're on a very tight schedule this year, but they'll get it, 6 to 7 days ahead of the meeting.
Fantastic. Thanks, Blythe. Looking at the select board meeting schedule, last night we decided that we will be holding a meeting on the night of the election. Given the uncontested nature of some of the races, we agreed that keeping that first Tuesday meeting of the month was important for us to be able to address the business before the board. However, we did push the start time to 8 p.m. to ensure it did not overlap with the times that the polls were open. After that, our next meeting will be May 18th, and we'll go back to our normal 7 p.m. time.
That's right.
Additionally, I did want to also highlight the upcoming Clean and Green event. This is an annual Earth Day event that is done in coordination with the Grange on Rockwood Road. This is the 12th annual townwide cleanup event that they'll be holding. This is going to be on Saturday. The idea is that you go around your neighborhood, go around highly volume and trafficked areas here in town, help pick up some of the trash that's around those areas, and then you're able to drop off that collected litter over at the Grange on Rockwood Road from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. So we look forward to seeing everybody pitch in, everybody help out, and to see the community come together for a great cause this Saturday.
Yep, looking forward to it. Thank you. Just a couple other things I'd like to make sure people just are aware that are occurring. Hydrant flushing started this month. It goes till early May, so that is still happening in various locations around town. Be aware of that. We also received notice from the county that aerial mosquito spraying will also happen this month. Unfortunately, it's really hard to say when that exactly will happen because it's dependent on weather conditions, but it is by air. So if people notice that, that's what's going on. And then it's the annual time of year where we're selling the decals for the transfer station. Those are available online for renewal for starting in July, or you can get them at the DPW. No changes in the price this year, same as last year. So urge people to get those when it's convenient for them to do so.
Thank you, Blythe. I think that's everything that we have for the community today. This will be our last show before we get through the election and town meeting. So we look forward to recapping with everybody once we get into the end of May, or dare I say, the beginning of June. Seems so far away right now, but look forward to getting there.